Thanks, John. Good morning. My name is Bill Farland. I'm the Vice President for Research out at Colorado State University, and I chair the Standing Committee. I want to take just a few minutes as we begin this morning to talk a little bit about the Standing Committee, make you aware of the what we're about here. And as John said, we have a lengthening history of these workshops now as we move into our fifth year. Basically, scientific discovery, new tools, and new approaches have really expanded our way of looking at environmental toxicology and environmental health. And so these workshops are really about trying to address some of these emerging areas and giving us an opportunity to really look at these things from the standpoint of implications for research strategies, looking at it from the standpoint of how it affects the way we assess risk and public health, and looking at it from the standpoint of where we are going with regard to regulatory programs within the federal government. My job today is to talk a little bit about the statement of task that we have. We are very pleased to be supported by the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences on the series of workshops. We do about 3 workshops a year. For those of you who are here for the first time or hearing about it on the webcast. We are not a committee that writes reports for the National Academy of Sciences, and in fact, we don't aspire to consensus in these workshops. We aspire to a lot of good discussion and dialogue and education to move things forward. As a standing committee, we have the ability to provide perspectives for the scientific community, and so we've put out now 6 newsletters around the topics of these workshops. Those were developed through interactions among committee members and speakers. We encourage speakers to publish some of their materials that they've used in these workshops to get the word out as well. So these are all opportunities for us to help to get the word out and to begin to push in a number of different areas to get incorporation of this new science into decision making, whether it's about research or whether it's from the regulatory standpoint. I won't go through the members of the Standing Committee, but there are lists of them, and we have a number of members of the Standing Committee, and our relationships to the National Academy here in the room today. We also have a very large and active federal liaison group for this particular activity that helps us to both design the workshops and also to provide the audience for the kinds of educational activities and implications for research within other federal agencies beyond NIEHS. And of course, we encourage them to participate in the workshop development and perhaps through leveraging of funding provide some support for workshops as well. So we are webcasting today. I'll ask people if they are participating in the discussion to say your name and identify yourself for the webcast audience. Use the microphone since we are recording. We have a growing audience on the webcast over the last 4 or 5 of these workshops, and that's been very good for us, I think, in terms of, again, helping to get the word out. So our statement of task really is to examine some of the issues that are emerging that have real implications for environmental health decisions and provide this kind of a public venue for good discussion. So you'll see a mix of presentations and panel discussions that involve the scientific community that is here from all walks of life, academics and industry and federal government, all well represented in the room. So I think without any further ado, I'll start with my presentation. I'm going to take just a few minutes to frame the workshop for you. And As John said, we have a particularly interesting topic today, and I think one of the things that is so satisfying about the work that we're doing with this standing committee is that our topics continue to evolve as we begin to look at various types of issues and emerging science. We have a chance to really begin to drill down into certain types of areas, and so for this particular workshop, there were a number of critical issues that have been coming up over a period of time, both with our committee and with others who are beginning to address similar types of issues. So one of the first ones has to do with the fact that as we begin to address this issue of individual variability, we recognize that it can be due to a variety of different aspects of both internal and external influences on our human populations. The discussion around today's workshop is focused on biological factors. We also recognize that external exposures have a big impact on variability in both susceptibility and response in populations, but this latter topic isn't going to be the focus of today's workshop. We'll talk a little bit more about this interaction, but really try to focus on endogenous and biological factors in today's workshop. The second thing I think that's important for us to understand is that variability is inherent in populations that we deal with, and it's not going to be changed significantly by our explorations or our involvement. That variability is going to be there. Susceptibility, on the other hand, is a different story. Susceptibility really relates to the way that variability in the population allows us to compare one individual to another individual in the population and indicate that they are more or less susceptible based on these kinds of factors that we're talking about. The National Academy of Sciences, in its Science and Decisions book, reminded us that it was difficult to estimate an average population risk without really understanding individual risk, and really having an opportunity to focus on that is going to be important for us. They also suggested that our current approach of suggesting approximately a tenfold sort of level of susceptibility within a population is convenient and it's useful, but at this point we really don't understand all of the nuances of susceptibility within a population and how we can do a better job at trying to estimate risks, understanding susceptibility within the population. As we look at some of the issues in today's science, we realize that some of the molecular techniques that we're getting are pointing out just how variable similar humans can be with regard to some of these endogenous and biological factors. And so today's workshop, we're going to explore some of that and think about how we can approach these issues. We're going to look at some of the new and innovative approaches for actually characterizing individual variability, and then think about that from the standpoint of what that means to us in terms of the individual's susceptibility to risk from environmental exposures. We've had an opportunity to deal with this in a number of different venues, and one of the things that this workshop will also consider is how these emerging understandings will allow us to formulate better policies and really communicate with the public, with decision makers, and with physicians to really understand how variability and susceptibility affects our advice. Now, we've had a number of workshops that have addressed issues that have bearing on both variability and susceptibility, and these are just the ones that I pulled out to give you a sense of sort of how some of these issues have emerged within our committee. Chris Wilde came to our workshops to talk about this concept of the exposome. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, this is the idea that all environmental exposures from conception on, including diet and lifestyle and endogenous sources, are a quantity that is really critical for us to understand if we're going to understand the etiology of disease. And so the discussions that we had around the concept of the exposome and the kind of techniques that could be used to look at individual exposomes, whether it was understanding internal measures of exposure through various techniques for looking at body fluids and various types of cells internally, or whether it was the use of new technologies to look at external estimates of exposure using everything from remote sensing and cell phones and other sorts of approaches of that type. These have been important for us as we've begun to think about the impacts of the environment on individuals in the population. We had a workshop that talked about mixtures and cumulative risk assessment, and the focus on that was really to look at this issue that we're beginning to understand, that as individual disparate exposures come together in the body, they can affect pathways of toxic response at various points and have the ability to interact in a number of ways. And so this was also something that we talked about, and that has a real impact as we think about variability of response and susceptibility. The microbiome, another issue that talks about the population within the population, the fact that we all carry another population that has the ability to react to and metabolize a variety of exogenous factors that impacts our own physiology and that has the ability to modulate how we respond to various types of things. Epigenetics, I think, has emerged as a particularly interesting aspect of gene-environment interaction and the impact of materials on normal programming for epigenetic change. The fact that we're able to see that things as disparate as psychosocial factors can have impacts on the genetic programming is something that was a focus of this workshop. And finally, we looked at early indicators of disease. This idea that one can have effects early on in life that can essentially predispose for impacts later on certainly is an issue that has an impact on variability in terms of what we see in populations and, of course, susceptibility as well. So these kinds of things sort of set the stage for us, and as we began to think about this workshop, we started to define this around a focus on the endogenous or biological factors. And I've included a few examples here. I think we certainly could talk about others, and we will through the course of the workshop as we look at the effect of polymorphisms within populations, so those types of genetic changes. With regard to general physiology, the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion that goes on, and how various types of exposures or our programming affects our homeostasis and our ability to essentially withstand various types of environmental exposures. Changes across the life stage, obviously something that's very important to us. And now we're seeing more and more the impact of pre-existing disease on responses to various types of exposures. And so those become important things for us to look at as well. As we begin to think about some of these issues with regard to individual variability and susceptibility, there are a number of approaches that we're going to discuss today that give us a a start at really looking at both the variability in the population and then the implications for that variability. Everything from high throughput screening and molecular approaches through population-based animal studies. Obviously, human studies continue to be important for us as we begin to do this characterization. We think about different ways that we can model those kinds of responses, and certainly innovative approaches for us to do the data analysis that comes out of these approaches. The field of bioinformatics has never been more important to us as we find that we can generate data faster than we can analyze it in many cases, and so this becomes a very important part of what we do. Part of what we want to do is to generate a shared appreciation for the implications of some of these activities, and I think just to take a look at a few of these, the opportunity for us to have improved public health decisions coming out of the understanding is something that is going to be important whether we're talking about populations or whether we're talking about individual decisions with regard to public health. We're going to hear about opportunities for developing stratified approaches to development of therapeutics and medications. And although we may not get to individualized medicine, we're beginning to make some real progress in terms of understanding how this can be used to our benefit. We're going to have a good discussion, I think, around new approaches to understanding and predicting risk within populations and addressing some of the approaches that we've taken in the past and some that we may be able to take with new information as it develops moving toward the future. And we're certainly going to have an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges of communicating susceptibility to our colleagues, whether these be individuals who carry susceptibilities because of their genetic makeup, whether these are populations that are because of lifestyle or socioeconomic status or other sorts of things are predisposed or are dealing with health issues that make them even more susceptible to certain types of environmental insults. So both qualitative and quantitative aspects of decision making, I think, can be affected by understanding of these kinds of issues. So finally, I think in terms of some desired outcomes for the workshop today, we'd really like to identify targeted research needs that are going to be important for us to move this field forward and to help to give our colleagues at NIEHS and EPA and Department of Defense and others who have a lot of interest in trying to provide the basic science that we're going to need through their research programs to make some good decisions. We're going to talk about approaches to improve risk assessment so that we can better understand and predict some of the issues that have to do with human susceptibility in population settings. And finally, be in a position to think about how we communicate this information to individuals, physicians, to the general population, and to decision makers in general to do a better job in making more informed decisions.